From Sumy to Donetsk, the same pattern is seen time and time again across the Ukraine war's front lines. Russian forces attempt assaults. Ukraine cuts down most of these assaults using artillery, mortars, and massive kill zones filled with drones that hunt and destroy anything Russian that comes across their path. It's already a bad pattern for Russia, and it's going to get worse. Ukraine just revealed a brutal new strategy to cut down 50,000 Russian troops per month so it can end Russia's war. At least that's according to Ukraine's newly appointed Defense Minister Mykhailo Fedorov, who has wasted no time at all outlining the two key objectives he has for Ukraine's military as it heads into 2026. Better management is the first of those objectives, and we'll be exploring what that means for Ukraine's army soon. But the second, most eye-catching objective is that Fedorov wants Ukraine's drone operators to increase their numbers to the point that they shred through 50,000 Russian soldiers per month. Fedorov doesn't just want injuries either. Ukraine's drones have been assigned a mission to seek and destroy, with destroy being the key term. Announcing his new objectives during his first public address, Fedorov says that Ukraine is more than capable of completing the task that he's set. Last month, 35,000 were killed. All these losses are verified on video, Fedorov told his country. If we reach 50,000, we will see what happens to the enemy. They view people as a resource, and shortages are already evident. Vladimir Putin has indeed been sending his soldiers into the Ukraine war meat grinder in their thousands, and Ukraine has been killing them so quickly that Russia's recruiters can barely keep up. Now it's about escalation. It's about showing Russia that Ukraine's work on building the most powerful and versatile drone army is far from done. If anything, it's just getting started. According to the Kyiv Post, Fedorov has a very specific endgame in mind for this ramping up of Russia's deaths on the Ukrainian battlefield. He wants to force Putin's hand. Fedorov's logic goes that Putin will only come to the negotiating table, and more importantly, take those negotiations seriously, if Russia loses so many soldiers that he can no longer hide the toll that the Ukraine invasion is taking on his country. Fedorov says as much himself, stating, "President Volodymyr Zelensky has set a clear task to build a system that is capable of stopping the enemy in the sky, halting its advance on the ground, strengthening asymmetric and cyber strikes against the enemy and its economy, to make the price of war for Russia such that it will not be able to bear it, and thereby force peace by force," Fedorov claims. This is about attrition, about bleeding Russia so dry that it doesn't matter how hard Putin tries to squeeze the stone that has become his country, nothing will come out, be that cash, resources, or the very soldiers that he sends to their deaths daily against Ukraine's indomitable drone wall. Fedorov wants to make one thing very clear to Putin. A new Ukrainian defense minister is in town, and he isn't taking any prisoners. To some, 50,000 dead Russian soldiers a month may seem like an ambitious target. What Fedorov is demanding is a new way of war that would see Ukraine gain the ability to wipe out a force roughly the size of the one that Putin sent to capture the Donetsk city of Pokrovsk in about 3 months. Pressure being placed on Pokrovsk and similar settlements, such as Mirnorad, would certainly be reduced if Fedorov's goal is reached. Ukraine would even gain opportunities to conduct counterattacks and perhaps even regain territory, due to the gaps created in the Russian lines. But if you think all of this sounds like fanciful talk from a new defense minister, then think again. Ukraine may just have what it needs to turn Fedorov's talk into Russia's new reality. You may have noticed an interesting little soundbite in one of Fedorov's quotes that we shared a moment ago. Ukraine's defense minister casually mentioned that Ukraine had eliminated 35,000 of Russia's soldiers in December alone. But that isn't quite the full story. The 35,000 figure comes from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, and it was shared alongside figures from the previous 2 months leading into December. In December, 35,000 occupiers were eliminated, and this has been confirmed with video footage, Zelensky said during his January 5th evening address to the Ukrainian people. He then added, "In November, there were 30,000, and in October, 26,000 eliminated occupiers." Can you see a pattern in these numbers? Across 3 consecutive months, Ukraine's kill count has risen. October was already a record-breaking month for Ukraine on the drone death front, but November saw it break its October record by 4,000 kills. December was another record-breaking month, this time with 5,000 extra kills. It's an admittedly small sample size, but it gives us an average of 4,500 kills via drones being added per month. And if the starting point is now 35,000 as seen in December, then following the pattern could have Ukraine at the 50,000 mark by the end of April. Of course, this assumes ultra-efficiency on Ukraine's part, along with the ability to keep breaking records. The most recent daily casualty rate we have for January comes from Pravda, which says on January 21st that Russia lost 1,170 soldiers during the previous 24 hours. These are casualties, not deaths. But even with this figure, it would appear that Ukraine is on track to hit 36,170 Russians down by the end of January. It's also important to note that the kill counts shared for the last 3 months were compiled from the footage collected by the drones doing the killing. That's a lot of footage, and it takes some time to go through. So it's very likely that Ukraine is killing more Russian troops than the current report suggests. We'll find out once January ends if Ukraine achieved another record-breaking month. One thing that Ukraine has plenty of is the drones to make Fedorov's demands possible. The vast majority of the confirmed kills that Fedorov and Zelensky mention over the last 3 months are a result of Ukraine's first-person view or FPV drones. These FPV drones capture footage of the battlefield in real time, allowing their operators to steer them toward Russian targets while capturing the footage of those targets and their terrified faces as the drones hit their marks. Ukraine has millions of these types of drones, almost 3 million by the end of 2025 alone, if a December 24th report in Pravda is anything to go by. Ukraine has hit those numbers by focusing on its domestic drone production to the point where the country's defense procurement agency was able to supply the Ukrainian armed forces with 2.4 million drones in 2025. Another 200,000 came to Ukraine via its dot-chain defense IT system, and they all added to the country's 2024 stockpiles. Break 3 million drones down into 12 months and you get 250,000 drones per month. As long as Ukraine has the operators, that should be more than enough to hit Fedorov's 50,000 Russian deaths per month, with drones to spare. Of course, Ukraine will also be adding to its stockpiles to make its already drone-infested kill zones so dangerous that Russian soldiers will be marching to near certain death whenever they try to launch their assaults. So Ukraine has drones, and the past results show that 50,000 is certainly possible. However, Fedorov hasn't just sent a command down from up high expecting it to be executed. That's the sort of thing that Putin does, and we've seen plenty of times how well that has worked out for the Russian military. To ensure that Ukraine is in a position to hit these ambitious killed-in-action numbers, Fedorov himself will be focusing on completing the first objective that we mentioned at the beginning of the video. He's got to transform the way that Ukraine's military is managed. We'll tell you how and why Fedorov is the man for that particular job. But before we do, we hope that you're enjoying this video so far. If you are, we'll really appreciate if you share the video, subscribe to The Military Show, and send us a comment telling us what you think about Ukraine's plans for 2026. On the management front, Fedorov has made one of the things he intends to do very clear with a slogan that he has created for Ukraine's military: more technology, fewer casualties. That focus on technology will start with Ukraine's Defense Ministry itself. Fedorov says that his main focus on the ministry will be a program of systemic reform that aims to modernize what he views as an outdated defense ministry via comprehensive changes. This isn't about adding new layers of bureaucracy. Fedorov's stated goal is to make the armed forces of Ukraine more lethal and more capable of standing firm in the face of Russia's attritional tactics. The ministry that Fedorov aims to overhaul has come under its fair share of criticism in the recent past. Back in January 2025, the German Marshall Fund of the United States, or GMF, published an inflammatory article in which it claimed that Ukraine's defense ministry needed protection from itself. It noted that Ukraine's former defense minister, Rustem Umerov, had set the ministry back by getting rid of the then head of Ukraine's Defense Procurement Agency, or DPA, Marina Bezrukova. Why did this matter? Unlike Umerov, who the GMF describes as a member of the old guard of Ukrainian politics, Bezrukova was all about reform of the defense ministry. Like Fedorov, she focused on cutting out the fat to make it easier for Ukraine to procure the weapons it needed for its fight against Russia. Her dismissal, the GMF states, meant that Ukraine had also lost somebody who had been applauded by NATO and the Group of 7 nations for the excellent work that she'd done. Umerov wasn't done with his cuts either, as he also got rid of the DPA's supervisory board, which had recommended that Bezrukova's contract be renewed. It almost sounds like the sort of power play seen so often in the Kremlin. Get rid of those around you who threaten your power and you'll stay safe. Umerov was seemingly more interested in keeping international arms dealers happy than he was on ensuring Ukraine's defense ministry ran as smoothly as possible. The influence operation did not start in either Kyiv or Moscow. It originated with international arms dealers who were disgruntled over being sidelined from Ukraine's weapons procurement supply chain and have been waging a campaign to unseat and undermine the reformist leadership of the DPA. Now they have achieved their objective, the GMF said in January 2025. By the way, if you're wondering what happened to Bezrukova, she came roaring back to her former position in very short order. By the end of January 2025, she had been reinstated, delivering a blow to Umerov in the process. As for Umerov, he was removed from his position in July. The point we're making here is that the old guard of Ukraine's defense ministry seemed intent on shutting down the reformers, who seemed more in tune with what the Ukrainian military actually needed. The old guard also created chaos through repeated cabinet shuffles, which Forbes said made several of Ukraine's Western partners nervous. A change has been needed for a while. Umerov proved that he wasn't the man to deliver it. Now, Fedorov is claiming that he will be the man to complete the reform of Ukraine's defense ministry to the point where the army that it oversees will become the scourge of Russia. Stick with us until the end to find out why Ukraine taking out 50,000 Russians monthly could cripple Putin's military. Returning to Fedorov's systemic reforms, the new Ukrainian defense minister says that the current Ukrainian military organizational structure is going to be reinvented through digitization and technological innovation. Fedorov will also carry out a deep audit designed to root out bureaucracy. The ministry's focus should be on providing support to active service members, especially those on the front lines, ahead of all else, if it's to be as effective as Fedorov says it needs to be. Fedorov also has plenty of projects in the pipeline for the future. The Kyiv Post says that Ukraine's defense minister is working with the British Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, and the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, all of which are think tanks or consulting groups that Fedorov believes will help him reform Ukraine's defense ministry. Other projects include the development of a new aircraft to compete with China's Mavic drone. However, this new drone will be made entirely of Ukrainian components. Munitions will soon be tracked using a centralized system, Fedorov claims, and the ministry is also working on ways to integrate Ukraine's attack and reconnaissance drones with artillery groups, which will lead to the creation of teams that can devastate invading Russian forces via drone attacks and coordinated artillery strikes. It all sounds ideal for Ukraine, but some may question if Fedorov is the man for the job. If he isn't, then Ukraine will be hard-pressed to find somebody more capable who also has the technology-based reform mindset brought into its defense ministry by Fedorov. Ukraine's defense minister is a native of the Zaporizhia region of Ukraine, which you may recall is one of the regions that Putin's waves of cannon fodder are targeting. Russia has managed to capture the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and claimed it held about 75% of the region by November 2025. So Fedorov has personal reasons for his desire to transform Ukraine's defense ministry into something special. He also has the credentials. Despite his young age, Fedorov had already established himself as a technology-focused entrepreneur before he entered the political arena. When Fedorov joined the Ukrainian government, he did so at the age of 28 in 2019. That made him Ukraine's youngest ever cabinet minister, and it set the stage for a meteoric rise that appears to have been fully earned. During his first few years in government, Fedorov demonstrated his ability to drag Ukraine's legacy systems kicking and screaming into the 21st century. The old paper-based record-keeping systems used in Ukraine's public service sectors were digitized, as was the country's state administrative work. Ukraine's people quickly felt the benefits. Everything from paying utility bills to registering pets was given an easy-to-complete online process under Fedorov's watch. The man clearly has a talent for using tech to streamline operations, and that should terrify Russia now that he's turned his focus to helping Ukraine's military kill 50,000 of Putin's soldiers per month. You could also argue that Fedorov established himself as somebody who excels at de-Russifying systems. Many of the state processes that he revolutionized through digitization were holdovers from Ukraine's time in the Soviet Union, as the Kyiv Post explains. The move digitizing more than 90% of state bureaucratic processes ended almost overnight decades of Soviet and Russian imperial service traditions, forcing citizens to collect sometimes dozens of pieces of paper from local officials, any one of whom might well demand a bribe, and then stand in a queue for hours for a single government approval, the outlet says. If you remember what we said earlier about Umerov and his almost Russian strategy for attempting to maintain power, then Fedorov seems like somebody who can breathe fresh air into a Soviet-influenced defense ministry. Fedorov has also played a huge part in the constant expansion of Ukraine's drone-based strategy since Putin launched his invasion. Ukraine's defense minister spearheaded the Army of Drones project. He's also the man behind the point-based system that Ukraine now utilizes to reward its drone operators for the kills they get on the battlefield. War on the Rocks reported on this system on January 7th. Participating operators upload footage of their kills to Ukraine's Delta system. Once those kills are verified, the soldiers gain points that they can spend on new drones and equipment in Ukraine's Brave One market. It's the gamification of a gruesome task, and it's led to Ukraine's drone operators eliminating more Russian soldiers, in addition to ensuring Ukraine can catalog its drone hits to the point where it can share figures like Russia losing 35,000 soldiers in December. Ukraine isn't guessing, it has the evidence, all thanks to Fedorov's initiatives. Now standing at the head of Ukraine's defense ministry is a man with a proven track record of creating and supporting technologies that lead to more Russian losses and greater Ukrainian efficiency. Russia should be terrified of this because Fedorov seems to be the type of man who can deliver on the ambitious goal of 50,000 Russian deaths per month. And if he implements the policies that free up Ukraine's military to do so much damage, then Russia is heading into a 2026 that could spell its doom for one major reason. It won't be able to keep up with the rate of attrition of its soldiers. Even Russia's already ambitious recruitment targets for 2026 won't be able to withstand the scale of death that Fedorov aims to enable with his reforms. On December 27th, the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine's military intelligence chief Kirill Budanov has reported that Russia aims to recruit 409,000 soldiers during the course of the year. Some quick maths tells us that this amounts to 34,083 soldiers per month, almost 16,000 fewer than Ukraine's new kill target. There are also early indications that fewer Russians are signing up to take part in Putin's war. January 20th saw United 24 media report that only 879 soldiers signed contracts with the Russian military in December 2025. That was more than half of the 2,000 contracts signed in 2024, and it shows that Russia's volunteer enlistment campaign is starting to show cracks. Our recruitment efforts have essentially failed. Instead of the expected 30 to 40% increase, the opposite occurred. It's clear to anyone that there are fewer recruits and no influx at all, United 24 media reported, an unnamed source is claiming. While it should be noted that these numbers come from a source that may be unreliable, they indicate that something is going very wrong with Russian military recruitment. What we're seeing now may be a turnaround. For most of the Ukraine war, Russia has been able to rely on sheer numbers to overcome Ukraine's many strategic and technological innovations. But that may be about to end. As Russia starts struggling with recruitment, a new wave of reform is going to sweep through Ukraine's defense ministry. If that wave leads to Ukraine scoring the 50,000 kills per month that Fedorov wants, then Russia will find itself unable to rotate enough new soldiers into Ukraine to keep up with the losses. All that Ukraine has to do is survive long enough to make that happen as it continues to destroy the Russian occupiers. With its defense ministry under Fedorov, Ukraine may just have the behind-the-scenes strategy and the technological know-how to do it. The country is also working to transform its air defenses, and those defenses just saved untold numbers of lives by having their best night in recent memory. Something went catastrophically wrong for Russia in its latest aerial assault, and you can find out what that was in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of the latest moves Ukraine is making to stop Russia in its tracks. And thank you as always for watching.